Welcome to LabMinutes.com. In the previous video, we have looked at how to identify a corporate Windows machine by joining it to a domain and perform machine authentication against AD. But with the mobile device become more pervasive, there is a chance that you may also need to deal with other corporate issued devices like an iPhone. So what you can do is to issue your iDevices a certificate which you can use to authenticate. This is exactly what we will go through in this video. So now let's take a look at our lab setup. Here we have a Cisco ISE running version 112 at the IP of .102. We have a domain controller also running a certificate authority server on the same server running at IP.40 and the wireless LAN controller at the IP.104. So the way this is going to work is we're going to have a separate SSID. All we're going to use it for is to provision their certificate. Here we call it LM-cert, and we're going to use the pre-share key on that. Since this particular SSID should not be used for anything else but certificate provisioning, you might not even have to broadcast the SSID, and you just have to manually enter it on the iPhone. And also at the same time, we want to make sure that once the device is connected to this particular SSID, all access it will have is to the certificate authority server. So what's going to happen is, with an iPhone, you will connect it to the LM-cert SSID. The iPhone will make the certificate request through SCEP. Once it has the certificate installed, it will try to join the actual production SSID. Here we call it LM-internal, using the certificate it has already obtained from the certificate server. And as part of the authentication, we're going to make sure that within the certificate, we will use a unique name in the common name. Here we're just going to embed it LM-iPhone, so we can configure our ISE server to specifically look for those strings, and that way ISE can identify the device being a corporate issue device iPhone. Okay, so with that said, let me first show you the configuration on the wireless LAN controller. So first we're going to connect to that. And for the SSID that we will use for certificate provisioning right here, we'll get into that, and it's called LM-cert. Right now we have it enabled, and I'm just going to map it to our regular user VLAN 64 network. Okay, for security, we have it set to WPA2 with pre-share key, so we have a pre-share key set for that already. But like I said earlier, this particular SSID might not even have to be broadcast for security reason. And better yet, you might even want to just use or deploy this particular SSID on just one access point where your admin will be sitting, or whoever that will be provisioning the iPhone. Okay, so pretty straightforward, just a simple SSID with a pre-share key for security. And here we've enforced a access list on it that we call LM-cert only. And if we move to the ACL configuration page, here access control list, under LM-cert only, all we are permitting is DHCP, DNS, and traffic going towards the certificate server. And you can even just lock it down by ports if you, for example, know that the SCEP traffic is just going to use whether it's HTTP or HTTPS. But right now, it just permit all TCP. Next thing I want to show you is the certificate template that we are using for SCEP certificate requests. So right here, if you go under the certificate authority interface and goes to certificate template, right click, go manage, and just look for the one that we're going to be specifically used for this. We call it LM-BYOD. Double click on that. Make sure that, let's see, right now we have the key size set to 1024. Make sure the private key cannot be exported. For subject name, instead of building all these attributes from the Active Directory, we want all this to be supplied in the request. That way, you will see in a sec when we start configuring the iPhone for the SCEP, you will see that you have an options to specify all the subject names, so on and so forth in the request. So this is very important to have this checked. For extension, make sure we have a client authentication here, and just default security. Alright, now that I've showed you that, let's next go to the iPhone configuration. So the tools that we'll be using to configure the iPhone for SCEP is what's called iPhone Configuration Utility. You guys might already be familiar with this particular tools. If not, let's go through that right now. So once you have this installed on your machine, you have an option to create a new configuration profile. So click on New, and here we give it the profile name called LM-iPhone-cert, so just a name. For identifier, let's use the same name. Organization, let's call it LabMinutes. Okay, so you can see there's not really a button to save or anything, so just move on and the config will be saved for you. Next, we'll configure the Wi-Fi, so we also want to inform the iPhone what's the new SSID it needs to connect to once it's got its certificate. So the SSID is called LM internal. We'll make sure it's auto joined, and let's make sure that it's also joined even when the SSID is hidden. For security type, let's see, we want to use BPA2 Enterprise with TLS. So you can see we have a lot more options than just doing TLS and PEEP. You can even do EFAS or EAP-SIM or TTLS, and these options may not even be available when you actually be on the iPhone and go to settings and the wireless settings. So this is more like a additional configuration they can do through this particular utility. For authentication, you have to come back and set this, even with the trust. So let's leave it at that. We just have to make sure once we set all these certificates, our trust certificate, we come back and configure that. So now let's move on to the credential, and this is what the iPhones will trust as far as the root certificate. So we click configured. Let's look for the one that's for our domain, which is LM-root-CA. Click OK. Okay, so we have that. Next we go to the SCEP, and this is the settings that you can do for SCEP. Okay, for the URL, I just want to make sure I have no typos, so I'm going to copy and paste. And we know the certificate server IPs for us is 32.40, and these are just a standard Microsoft URL for the SCEP. For the name, we're going to call this particular one for iPhone cert. Now, subject name, you have pretty much all the freedoms to specify what kind of strings you want to embed in the subject name. Again, let me go ahead and copy that. Just want to make sure there's no typo here. And here I can see we embed the string LM-iPhone. So in a few minutes, we'll configure ISE to look for that. You also might want to embed the actual user. So if an iPhone is going to be issued to a particular user, you might want to embed this username in there so you can quickly identify once the iPhone authenticate on the reporting page on ISE whose iPhones actually belongs to the owner of the iPhone. Okay, so here we're going to use admin1 as our test user. So we embed admin1. And then you can specify other standard certificate attribute here, which is to OU and O for organization. Okay, for subject alternative name, we're going to select RFC822. Subject alternative name value, call LM iPhone. Let's keep it simple. Principal name also. Challenge, if you happen to have your certificate server set, SCEP setting set for a challenge, then this is where you need to type in the password. For us, we do not have that challenge password set on our server. In that case, just have to type in something random just to let the tool continues. Okay, key size, we're going to do 1024 just to keep it simple and fast. We're going to use check both boxes. And now for the fingerprint, again, this is like a security settings. Just want to make sure that when the iPhone is trying to request a certificate, it's got a matching certificate authority server. So here we have a root CA, LM root CA. Okay, you might want to confirm the fingerprint matches to your root CA self-signed certificate. Okay, so now that I have that checked, let's go back to the Wi-Fi settings that we left off because we didn't have a certificate setting back then. And now we go to authentication and the identity certificate. If you drop that down now, we can select that. Okay, and for the trust, since we have specified the trusted root certificate, we're just going to check that box and we should be all set. So at this point, you might want to go ahead and export it if you want to save as a separate file so you can reuse it later. But for us, I think we're ready to push this profile out to our iPhone. So let me bring over the interface in the iPhone. Let me kind of rearrange my screen so you can see it. So here we have an iPhone connected and identified. So right here, device is LabMinutes iPhone. Click on that. Now you go to the Configuration Profile tabs, and right here, your profile that we just configured shows up. And there's a little button here where you can click to install that. So go ahead and click install. You can see on the iPhone side, it's asking you to verify that there's a profile it's trying to be installed. So you click install. Actually, even before that, let me cancel because I think we skip a step, which to make sure the iPhone connects to the LM-CERT wireless network so it can communicate to the certificate authority server. So here we have to turn on our Wi-Fi. And we have here LM-CERT, so we'll click on that. Since it did this before, it remembers the pre-share key, otherwise it would have prompted you to type in the pre-share key. So now that we are connected to the LM-CERT, and just to do a quick check for the IP, it's a correct IP address. So now it's trying to install that one more time. Okay, click install. Now it's asking you to accept the the root certificate. Here for us is LM root CA. It will be added to the list of the trusted certificates, so I'll say install that. So generating the keys, you can see all the updating messages here is enrolling certificate now. And once you pass that, you know that the certificate has been issued. Now it's trying to install the profile and it's completed. Before I go ahead and click done, let me go back to the certificate server, check and see if the certificate has actually been issued. So it should be this one right here. You can see it's called LM IP phone admin 1, just like we specified in the subject name. Okay, the other thing that we also specified was the subject alternative name. We call it LM iPhone. So we know that certificate is good. Close that, go back to the iPhone. You can check the details on the profile that just got pushed. One is the root, the CA root self-signed root certificate that it wants to trust, or we want it to trust. The other one is its own certificate with the common name LM iPhone admin 1. And the other thing that got pushed was the Wi-Fi profile. Okay, so all those are already installed. Let's go ahead and click done. Now we have that profile installed. Okay, before will be able to connect to the production SSID so-called that we call it, which is LM-internal. We need to first finish our configuration on the Cisco ISE. So we'll go back to our Cisco ISE interface, and now we have to complete the Authentication Authorization profile. So let's take a look at what we have right now as far as the authentication policies rather. So policies, authentication. And I believe from the previous lab we already have the wireless authentication rules configured, and that we allow both PEEP and TLS, and we pointed to a particular certificate profiles. So we're good as far as the authentication rules. Now for the authorization, we're going to have to come up with a new condition. So we'll go policies, condition, open a new tab. Okay, we go authorization. Compound conditions. And we know this is going to be wireless, so let's make a copy of wireless. So duplicate. And let's call it this time LM Corp for corporate iPhone. And we want to specifically match the string that we have embedded in the common name. So certificate, common name, instead of equal, we're going to do starts with. And we know they are going to start with LM-iPhone. Again, just to show you back on the iPhone, here with the profile, detail, we have an LM iPhone admin 1 for this particular user. Okay, so go submit. All right, now we need to create an authorization rule. Since this one, we already have two, let's see, for LM Wireless from our previous EAP-TLS lab. Let's make sure that this one goes above the wireless one since this is more specific. And we want to make sure that it doesn't get caught by these two rules that's already in there. So let's duplicate above, and let's call it the LAN Corp iPhone. And we're going to point that to LM Corp iPhone. And let's permit everything. And again, this depends on your security policy in your organization. So you might want to restrict it to just certain resources, but for our lab purposes, we want to do permit all. Let me make sure I select the WLAN one. Okay, so done, save. All right, so now that we have the authentication authorization policies in place, we can now go back to our iPhone and try to connect to the production SSID. So here, go back to Wi-Fi. Let's open I'll go to the authentication log page. Let's make sure that one has been saved. So that looks like it's been saved. Here, the LAN Corp iPhone. Okay, so let's give it a try. LM internal. Okay, looks like it's connected. Let's check the IP. Yes, seems like we got a correct IP there. Going to the monitor page, do a refresh, and there you go. We saw it come in with LM iPhone admin 1. Before we take a look at this, let's make sure our iPhone has internet. Okay, let's try the internet. And looks like we have access to internet here. Let's see if it can try to yes, it looks like we do have access to internet. Okay, so now let's go back to our ISE server, look at the authentication page, detail page. Okay, so now it's loaded. Let's see. So I have a lot of protocol EAP-TLS. We got the VLAN permit all just like how we configure it. Came in as EAP-TLS. And the username, since we tell ISE to use the CN or common name, so since we specifically create a certificate to have this particular strings for the common name, and see it matched our authorization rule that we created, the LAN Corp iPhone. All right, so everything else looks just like a regular EAP-TLS authentication. Okay, so the way we did our certificate install here, we use an individual or a specific common name for the device. So that means if you choose to do it this way, you probably have to create an individual search for each device, which could be a lot, depends on the number of devices in your network. The other way is to create a single cert for all of your mobile devices, and you just basically have to export it and install them all. But that way it's going to be a little difficult to identify who's the owner of the device, like right here, since we have the username embedded into the username, we can tell right away that who is the owner of the device. But if you do a share certificate way, then this name would just be a generic, and without actually trying to figure out the MAC address, you would not be able to know the owner of the device. But that would definitely save you a lot of certificate that you need to issue if you happen to have a lot of devices in your environment. Okay, so the same process that we've gone through in this video can be used for other iDevices as well, not just iPhones or like iPad. Although not so much on any kind of devices that run other operating system. You can see here the method we use here is a iDevice specific. But the concept is the same. Like For example, if you have like an Android to install the certificate, the procedures to install the certificate would just be a little different. Okay, so as far as security is concerned, it's going to come down to locking down your PKI environment and make sure that not just everyone can make the SCEP certificate request to your server and obtain certificate, or even a transfer certificate from one device to another to circumvent your security system. So that's just a little something that you might want to keep in mind when you want to deploy this into production. Okay, so that should wraps up our video on iPhone SCEP Certificate Install with EAP-TLS. Thank you for watching LabMinutes.com, and I'll see you guys in the next ISE video.